pals, and there's also therapy too.
Hey guys, welcome to Park Pals. Thanks so much for joining us today. Hope everyone's week / month / whatever time frame you want to talk about is going well, and that you're having a moment where you feel peaceful. Let's just get right into it. So today we are talking to the amazing Jeffrey Mossa, who was the art director on Parks for, I believe he said 4 seasons. He started in season 3, which is perfect because we talk about Time Capsule. Or no, he must have started in season 2 rather, because we talk about Jurassic Fork, which is so exciting. I'm going to let him tell you about all of this. I will say this is an episode for the techies out there. So, and by techie, I just mean kind of like crew stuff and behind the scenes stuff, nuts and bolts stuff, where we don't talk about a specific episode in general. But we definitely talk about like really technical logistical things and what each, job is for the crew that we talk about, meaning art director, production designer, because those were my main 2 questions. But he was super awesome, and I'm so glad that I got the chance to touch base with him because I learned a lot. I really did, and I feel like we didn't even talk that much, and I could have gone like way further in depth, but I'm so glad that I got the information that I did get as far as what his job looks like, how you get involved in this job, what kind of the differences are with each job. I'm not even going to say too much because he explains it way better than me, but I just thank him so much. I can't believe we learned so much about Jurassic Fork and Harvest Festival and the Time Capsule, and now that I have his information, I will 100% be asking questions if that comes up when we're reviewing the show. So thank you so much for being here and for listening. And again, if you're not into like the techie stuff, then maybe we skip this one. I don't know, but I think that you'll learn something regardless because it was just awesome. Again, thank you, Jeffrey, for your time. This was so fun. There was a little bit of a technical issue on my end where my mic stopped working and he couldn't hear me. And so I had to hang up and start over. So I'll try to edit that so that you don't hear it. But if there's any sorts of blips or hiccups, that's why. But again, thank you so much, Jeffrey. Please follow him on his website and go watch The Boys, which he was on season 3 working on. So I'll definitely be adding that to my watch list. I'll tag everything and I'll post every link and everything in the show notes. If you haven't rated or reviewed us, please do that and follow us on Instagram at Park Pals Podcast. Thanks again so much, Jeffrey, for coming on. So great. You are a friend of the pod, and we will talk soon. So without further ado, here is Jeffrey Mossa.
There's a park and some pals, and there's also therapy too.
So how's your day going so far?
Very busy. It's good though. How are you?
Good. I feel like really tired lately, but I don't know if that's just because summer's coming to a close and like everything's starting to pick back up or what it is.
Yeah, my summer's been so busy it doesn't even feel like summer. So
yeah, or maybe that's what it is too. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, well, I won't take up too much of your time because I know that you're super busy. But I just had some questions. First of all, welcome to Park Pals. Hello.
Hello. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. One of the first questions that we typically ask our guests is, how did you come to get your job on Parks and Rec? And did you know anybody? Like, tell us a little bit about how this happened.
That's a good question. So I joined in season 2. Season 1 was, of course, only the 6 episodes, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Dan Bishop was the production designer from season 1. Only stayed on there. Ian Phillips, who became the production designer in season 2, took over and was looking for somebody. And Dan and I have a lot of folks in common, and we sort of worked together a little bit. Dan did Mad Men for years.
Oh, okay.
And we had some folks that we had worked with that were similar. So I often heard his name. I'm sure he probably heard my name often enough. And then he and Chris Brown, who was his art director at the time, they were doing the first Twilight movie.
Oh my God.
In Portland. Yes.
Okay.
And so it overlapped a little bit with season 2 of Mad Men.
Okay.
And so when season 2 of Mad Men started, Dan was stuck up there. Chris came back down to start season 2 and he needed some help. And so I popped in to help Chris for just helping him start until Dan came back. And so it was really that Chris Brown and I had, and I think actually Chris was one of the art directors in season 1 of Parks and Rec. But Chris Brown and I have had sort of parallel careers, and we often actually competed for jobs for years. But we're good friends, and but that was sort of the beginning of us meeting, and so that's how I met Dan, and therefore when Ian, who had also been working with Dan for years, was looking for somebody, one of them suggested that he call me.
Gotcha. So the one working on Twilight was also working on Parks, and he had to stop, or what was that storyline?
Yeah, Dan Bishop, the original production designer. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Gotcha.
He was working on the first season of Mad Men, and then when the first season of Mad Men ended, he did the first season of Parks and Rec.
Okay, got it.
Then he went to Portland to do Twilight, and then then Mad Men was starting up again. So I think everybody always knew that Dan wouldn't be able to stay with the show with Parks.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, the reason I ask that, and it sounds silly, but it actually ties back to Parks because we just did Time Capsule, which was basically a rewatch of Twilight.
I didn't watch Twilight, but yes, that's interesting.
Well, it's really funny because Will Forte's character is like really into Twilight because his daughter is really into Twilight, trying to get the books into the time capsule, and
right.
Yeah, so when we were rewatching it, we were just like, was somebody involved in Twilight? I mean, I'm sure that it just kind of happened because obviously, like during that time, I want to say at least 3 movies had been out and all the books had already been out, but it was just like this big, hubbub of the books becoming being popular and watching the movies and stuff. So it was really funny to hear that.
Yeah, I think that may have been the thing that sort of put it on the radar, or it might just have been the popularity of it at the time. Who knows? Dan is actually still good friends with all of those folks. Matter of fact, I think it was in season 5. So Dan was the original designer of the original Parks and Rec bullpen, right? We over the years expanded that whole set, but he did the original bullpen, and right outside of Ron Swanson's office, you open the door, there was a column. Yeah. Right. And it was the sort of thing where it was super realistic, but also a bit of a pain in the neck for shooting at times. And so they kept it there for years. But they actually wrote in an episode somewhere like in season 5 where they had workers coming in and removing the column. So we had to make the column look completely real as they were sort of jackhammering it out. And I don't know if they actually kept this in there, but in the original script, they were like, well, the architect, Dan Bishop, put this here and we think it's dumb and whatever. And so they actually worked his name into the script. I think it may not have made the final cut. Yes, but it was
I'll have to go back and look at that. No, I remember exactly what you're talking about, though, because Ron really likes that because it blocks people from seeing him or looking into his office.
That's right.
And so then Chris Traeger removes it or whatever so that he can have more access to the public.
That's right.
Which is so hilarious. Well, that's awesome. Yeah. I had no idea that Dan was responsible, and that's kind of was one of my questions, was responsible for the creation of the bullpen in there, because it looks very good flowing as far as like, Amy Poehler's character can see into Ron's and all that kind of stuff. Also, you might hear my cat.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all try to do that to a certain degree when we're designing office spaces and bullpen spaces for camera. You tend to want to have something that is a little bit more cinematic than what might be in real life, and then you try to ground it in reality too. I think Dan did a really nice job of it initially. So yeah, that set we just expanded. We just continually expanded as the years went on. That hallway was really, really long.
Mm-hmm.
We made it even longer, and then we made a whole other wing to City Hall that got redressed as like the evil fourth floor, and I think it played as a few different floors, and then we would add a bathroom, and then other hallways with more murals, and it was a constant growing thing.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to kind of ask about that as well, as far as like what I've been learning when with the outside sets that aren't in parks. Like I just learned recently that the hospital and Anne's house were both sets. They were not an actual hospital or an actual house on the inside. And so I was kind of wondering like who kind of spearheads what that's going to look like and how to go about building all of that.
I'm trying to remember the hospital you're referring to. Wasn't there for long, right?
Because Anna's the nurse, and so flu season and random
stuff. Right. I think it was like season. I think that was season 3 and 4, maybe.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's so many years ago.
It's a lot.
I apologize. It's all coming back to me. So, in general, it's whoever the production designer is at the time. So Dan, he was responsible for everything in the first 6 episodes. Anything you see in the first 6 episodes, that's generated from him. And obviously the production designer has a discussion with the showrunners and the writers, which at the time was Greg Daniels and Mike Schur. Greg was less hands-on after season 1. He was still around occasionally, but it was mostly Mike Schur. And so ultimately it starts with the discussion between the showrunner and the production designer, and then we all develop it as a team from there. So the hospital was Ian Phillips was the production designer. I was the art director.
Okay.
Very vague memories of that set.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, it looked wonderful. So, kudos to both of you, because it really looks like a real hospital. And even a couple of like my research, which was showing people like actors that were in, or crew or whatever, were like, oh my gosh, that wasn't like an actual hospital, right? And they were really giving a lot of compliments on it. But speaking of that, to your point, art director and production designer, can you help me understand from a layman's term, aka me, what exactly the difference is, and kind of walk me through like what that means?
Sure. The production designer is the if each department has its own pyramid, right? The production designer is the top of the pyramid, so he's ultimately equivalent to being an architect and an interior designer, sort of rolled into one. Now, underneath the art director, underneath the production designer, the next level would be the art director and the set decorator, right?
Okay.
And so typically the art director handles a bit more of the logistics, managing schedules and staffing and who's going to do what, and making sure that the drawings are done on time, and working with construction and overseeing a lot of that. While the production designer typically will try to concentrate more on the creative conceptual work. And then also the production designer has to go out with the location manager and find locations based on what he or she thinks is correct for that specific thing. Each show is different. And so on some shows, those dynamics may shift and ebb and flow a little bit. When I was in my art directing days, I was potentially, I would describe myself as a little bit more involved in the creative than many might be.
Okay.
So I worked a little bit more hand in hand. I certainly had on parks, I certainly had many one-on-one conversations with Mike Schur about lots of little elements, and Ian and I had a great relationship, and he trusted me to do that, especially if Ian was out scouting for something. But a lot of times it doesn't work that way, and then other times the production designer sometimes does get involved in the logistics, but it's mostly, everybody has to deal with logistics, right? So if the production designer is coming up conceptually with the creative and concentrating on, hopefully he's 80% or 85% just creative and conceptual,
Yeah.
and then seeing that vision through. And then, he has a small percentage of logistics, and then the art director is there to hopefully handle 60% logistics, and then hopefully, like more like 40% creatives, so that it creates a nice balance and everything is running smoothly and everybody's, really working towards the one vision.
Okay. That makes so much more sense. Okay. Because in all my research, and I pride myself on my research, but like without hearing somebody who's actually done the job before, it's really hard to kind of differentiate. So that's really cool. So you guys kind of create a team as far as like, it's almost like, I don't know. To me, the way that sounded almost sounded like a principal, vice principal type situation.
A little bit, yeah, sure,
dynamic. Yeah. But okay, cool. So I guess I have two questions, I guess, but they kind of go together as far as like, how did you get started in this, and then what would you recommend for someone who might be looking into this kind of field?
When I was in middle school, this goes back into the late 70s, early 80s. So when I was in middle school and there were only 3 channels on TV and everything interesting was movies, right? So
yeah.
They had, occasionally they would put on a primetime special, and there was a primetime special about Industrial Light and Magic. Who was responsible for doing all of the miniatures for Star Wars and for Raiders of the Lost Ark and all of those movies. And I was fascinated, and I was always artistic as a kid, and I could draw and create things. And so after seeing that, that sort of set me on my path. When I was like 7th grade, I knew I wanted to work in this business, and I knew I could draw. So at the time, I didn't know quite what that meant. I thought it meant that I was going to work in special effects. And then in high school, I ended up designing some shows, not with the drama club, but we had some sort of a spring variety show that I ended up designing and working on some sets for that. And one of the guidance counselors at my high school told me I should apply to Boston University's theater program, which I did. And sort of that set me on the path, and the rest is history. I studied theater in a conservatory style program at undergraduate level, knowing that I was going to shift into film and television. There aren't really any great design programs undergraduate for film. There's a few now, but there's some at a graduate level, but not as an undergraduate. So I'm the rare story of knowing what I wanted to do from a very young age and never sort of wavering. And then it was just a matter of trying to figure out how on earth I was actually going to find a job in the business, because I knew nobody.
Right.
So,
do you feel
graduated.
Like, you said it was Boston University?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Me and my co-host, who joins me every now and again, it went to Berklee College of Music in Boston. So,
nice.
Well, I guess now Boston Conservatory at Berklee, or whatever it is.
Yeah, I actually have a 18-year-old son who's headed off to college today, in fact, and that was one of the schools he applied to and got accepted to, but did not choose to go to.
Gotcha. Okay, well, congratulations to him. That's so exciting. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, do you feel like Boston University gave you like a good start as far as like the education piece of it to kind of plug into the film TV situation, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, for sure, because a design process is the foundations of the design process is the same, whether you're working as an architect or you're working as a theater designer, or whether you're designing theme parks. The sort of the basics there are kind of the same. And then it was then up to me to sort of shift and learn the things that I didn't learn in theater school,
right?
Which is mostly, camera work,
sure,
screenwriting, those sorts of things. So, because the one thing that BU was great for is they made us do everything. So, I had to sew costumes, and I had to hang lights, and I had to paint sets, and I had to make props, and I had to do all that stuff. So,
be a team player.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I lucked out. Honestly, it was not my first choice of school. I landed there sort of by default, and it all worked for the best.
Yeah,
So
it happens. And
yeah,
so then was LA next then for you, or was it New York, or like, or did you stay
LA
in
was
Boston a
next.
little bit? Okay.
I
Okay.
literally shortly after I graduated, packed my car full of a bunch of stuff and just spent the next 4 months driving across the country, visiting all my friends from college who are now all over the country.
Mm-hmm.
And then landed, I don't know if it was 4 months, maybe it was 6 weeks. It's all a blur. But
Yeah.
I took my time driving across the country. I drove down the Eastern Seaboard, then I drove up to Chicago, then I drove down to Austin, then I finally made it over to Los Angeles, and I knew nobody, and I had nowhere to live, so I lived in a youth hostel for a couple of weeks,
Okay.
and then chipped away at it. I got a job as a scenic painter for the UCLA theater department,
Okay.
and then that led to me meeting some graduate students in the design program in the film school at UCLA. They would occasionally assist designers who were doing stuff in the real world. So then I started assisting designers who were doing stuff in the real world. And then it just sort of rolled from there. And I was
Snowballed.
I was working on TV commercials a lot. I was working on theme parks and trade shows and all kinds of stuff.
So were you helping design everything as well? Like, I know that you said it was kind of a percentage of both of those things, like logistics and the designing, but it sounds like you were really creative in the designer part. But
Yeah, you're talking Parks and Rec specifically?
well, right now I'm talking about where you were with UCLA and all your jobs there.
Oh, when it was fresh out of school, mostly I was kind of a hired hand. I did a lot of concept sketches for people. I did a lot
Okay.
of construction drafting and that sort of stuff, building white models and mock-up models
Oh,
and that
okay,
sort of
okay,
stuff.
gotcha.
So at that stage of the game, I was just assisting and learning, really.
Gotcha.
Um,
Have you
and
production
then,
designed too then? Like, do they
oh,
go hand in
yes.
hand?
Yeah, I'm a full-time production designer now.
Okay, gotcha.
I have been trying to remember exactly when it started. I made the transition on season 1 of Ray Donovan. So
Okay.
I left Parks and Rec and then went over to Ray Donovan, and I started as the art director, and then I took the show over, and that's sort of started. And then there was a couple of art directing jobs in between there, but mostly I became the production designer on projects from there on out.
Gotcha. And that's where like American Horror Story and all that stuff comes in?
That's right.
Oh my
Yep.
gosh. Okay, so exciting. Okay. Did you have to like apply for that, or how does that work? Like, is it like an audition kind of situation? You know what I mean? With the crew jobs, you never know.
That is a very good question. There's no applying for jobs in this business.
Yeah.
There's no listings of, hey, we need somebody. So you have to network, and you have to just hustle and call people. And then, hopefully one thing leads to another. Like, I got on Parks and Rec because I had worked with Chris Brown, who had worked with Dan Bishop, and Ian, who had also worked with Dan Bishop, needed somebody. So he knew to call me. And then, when he called me, I just happened to be available. Right.
Right.
A lot of times people call me and I'm not available because I'm working on a show. So, early days, and we're talking early mid 90s, when the internet was just in its infancy and we all had dial-up modems and fax machines. The way to get a job was I wasn't in the union yet, and I knew somebody who was, and they were willing to give me, they weren't supposed to, but they were willing to give me a union directory. So I got a hold of a union directory, which had all the designers' addresses in there. So then it was a matter of, I would look up, and again, there was no internet. So they used to produce this book that was like a phone book, like an old style phone book every year, that was just a list of credits for designers, directors of photographies, costume designers, and maybe some producers. I don't know. But you could buy this book, and you could look it up by project or by person. So I would look up movies that I liked, right? And I would say, oh, okay, who designed that movie? Here's the name of who designed that movie. Then I would try to get their address and their phone number. Then I would send them a letter and a resume.
Oh my
and
gosh.
Then I would call and ask them if they'd be willing to meet with me. And, you have to send out about 100 of those in order to get 5 people to actually talk to you. So it's a lot of that. It's a little easier now, obviously, because you can look anybody up on IMDb. You can track a lot of people down. I suspect you found my contact information right off of my website.
Yeah.
Some people put that up there. A lot of people don't. Like a lot of people just say, well, you have to contact my agent.
Right. That's usually the route that I go because I have IMDb Pro just because, of acting and things like that. So I'll go through the agent first just in case. But if a direct email or whatever is up, then that must mean that they would not mind me using it. So that's why I kind of like use that if needed.
Yeah. If I didn't want that, I wouldn't put it up there.
Right.
I occasionally get, most of the time these days, if somebody wants me to interview for a show that they're doing and they don't know me, they will go through my agent. But once in a while, people contact me directly, and I want them to be able to, because every now and then somebody tries calling my agent, and my agent doesn't answer their calls for days, which is not good, but it happens.
Right. Or they'll I understand. I'm sure some people have like an agreement, but like some agents will say like, no, they're not interested, but the person doesn't actually ever hear about it. So
Absolutely. And the other end of that is there are young people and young designers who are coming up who may want to reach out to me. And it happens often enough. And so I leave that up there for them. And, I try to meet with everybody and give them the best advice. And if I have something to offer them, I might, or I might not. I have a gal working for me right now who tracked me down and met with me for the first time. Like we met at a coffee shop, and we met for the first time like 4 or 5 years ago. And I told her, I don't have anything for you at the moment. I like the work that she was showing me, and I liked where she was at. And I said, just keep in touch with me, keep bugging me. So, she would email me every 4 to 6 months or whatever. She's working for me now. It took 5 years, but she's sitting here in my office working for me. So, that's kind of what you have to do.
That's amazing for both of you then. Like you, being open to like helping new people and mentoring and everything, but then also on the flip side, the other person making sure that they're on top of it and, just being persistent with it.
It's tricky because you worry about if you're too persistent, you're annoying, but you also have to try to claw your way into this business. I had a few people along the way who really helped me out, mentored me, took me under their wing. And, the biggest way to pay them back is to offer the same to younger people coming in. But it's, to answer your question about what advice I would give to people trying to start out, it's not easy. You get, it helps to get a design degree of some sort. A lot of people who do what we do come through architecture school. Some come through theater school, and some come through just fine arts or a number of other things. And then, fortunately, it is a little easier. You can go on IMDb, you can track down some names, and then hopefully you can find some email or contacts, and then you can reach out. And the advice that I would give is you've got to be persistent. A lot of people, I get a lot of emails from people looking to break into the industry. Some of them I can tell that they've gone to about 100 other people, and they are not very personalized, and they didn't really take time, and they might not even know who
template situation,
and they might not even know who I am. I don't answer those. But if it's clearly not a copy paste situation, I always try to answer. And I do try to meet with them. And sometimes I get those emails, and then I'm like, okay, I got to get back to this person. And then 4 days go by, and then it's 100 emails deep, and I forget.
That's what
So
I always think about too. When people don't message me back, I mean, it's not that I ever really took it super personally, but I would always be like, maybe I'm being annoying. But at the end of the day, with how busy everyone is, it's just like if you're being genuine about, I'm only following up because I don't know where we are yet. Like there was no answer, and then they'll either like not respond back, or they'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I totally forgot. You know,
yeah,
which
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's fine.
Yeah, and honestly, we work in a business where if somebody's going to get annoyed, then
Yeah.
oh well, then move on. Okay, now they're annoyed. Okay, that's not a person you're going to try to connect with in the future. That's fine. There's a lot of people you can connect with. So, the advice I would give is for people to be persistent. And if you think you're being annoying, it's okay.
Yeah.
Can't be afraid to be annoying. And then the other piece of advice is, you've got to have a cast iron stomach, because there are going to be, and you've got to be able to take a punch, because there are going to be people who are going to try to knock you down, and they're going to insult you, and they're going to, like, I certainly had people. I had one person when I was younger that looked through my whole book. I think I probably met with like 2 or 3 people over the course of two or 3 weeks. Right. And I had this one meeting, and they were like, oh man, we love your stuff, but we don't have anything right now, but please stay in touch. And then I had the second meeting. It was the same. They looked through my stuff. It was the same sort of thing. I love your stuff. It's great, but keep in touch. I don't have anything right now. Try calling this person. And then I met with this third person. Right. And then I'm in his, like, I met him at his apartment in the West Village in New York City. And he gets in there and he's looking through my book, and he closes it. Takes hardly any time, and he closes it, and he looks at me and he goes, I've seen better work, and and there are going to be those people, and
Yeah.
you got to be able to take that punch and go, okay, I'm going to learn from that and move on. And then you have to be willing to figure out how you survive when, you just worked on 3 shows in a row, and you've been working for 19 months straight, and suddenly 3 months have gone by and you can't find a show and you can't find a job, and you feel like everything is like, you feel like your career is just falling apart. But it's not the case, but it feels like that in that moment,
Of course. Well, it's just so inconsistent, this whole industry.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, you stick with it. And the sort of the way I measured it when I was starting is like, okay, I've been working in this business for 5 years, and it maybe I've not been working 300 days a year, but I've been working in this business for 5 years. And I've seen a lot of people who are my peers try to work and then give up. So I know if I've made it 5 years, then a certain amount of my competition has dropped off. And then when I made it 10 years, I was like, oh, I guess this is actually my career now.
Right. Right.
And then, for most of us, tends to get busier and busier, and then you end up having to get to the point where you just can't possibly take all the jobs
more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so on like an actual day, or not day, well, I guess technically day, but so say you're on Parks and Rec, or you can take whatever show, but obviously since we're talking about Parks and Rec, then we can use that as an example. But like, what would and I know that this will change and be inconsistent, I'm sure, because there's so many moving parts, but like, what would a typical day be, or is it even daily? Like, how does the job work from time, like from day to day or month to month or week to week even? Like, what are your responsibilities kind of during the day? And are you going, I mean, clearly you have an office that looks beautiful, but like, are you going to the office for for each show, like that kind of thing, if that makes sense?
Sure. So, well, let's just take Parks and Rec, because it is a Parks and Rec podcast, right? So,
right.
Because every show is different, and every show can be wildly different. But Parks and Rec was a half-hour show, and it was shot. Each episode was shot over a course of 5 days, right?
Okay.
So 5 days of shooting. And then what we would typically do, although this wasn't consistent, but what we would try to do is we would shoot 3 episodes, and then there would be a week off of filming, and then shoot 3 episodes. And that would allow the writers to kind of catch up and keep us rolling. And sometimes we didn't have time for those little shooting hiatuses, and we just had to keep rolling.
Yeah, that was actually one of them because, well, I know for between season 1 and 2 is because Amy Poehler was pregnant and they wanted to give her a
That's
long
right.
maternity leave. So that is
That's
one.
right.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But typically, just to give you an idea of the structure of Parks and Rec, there was Ian, who was the production designer. There was myself, who was the art director. And this is just talking art department staffing at the moment. We had one set designer, and the set designer is responsible for doing all the construction draftings and drawings. We had one graphic designer, and we had an art department coordinator, and we had an art production assistant. Once in a while, we would bring in an extra person, but that was the basic department. And so it was a little bit divide and conquer, right? So when we're prepping, Ian would go out with the director and a writer and the line producer, and they would scout for potential locations for the sets that we knew would be locations.
Okay.
Meanwhile, if we were going to build some sets, Ian and I would have spent some time talking about what the basic concept was. He might have given me some reference. He might have given me a ground plan or whatever. And so then while he's out scouting, I would typically be taking whatever we're going to build, and I would be working with the draftsman to make sure that we're drawing it the way it should be drawn. And so getting that process started. Meanwhile, that's prepping for the next episode. Meanwhile, we're shooting an episode currently, right?
Right.
And so we might be at new locations, and we might be on new sets, in which case Ian might be out. And so if for instance, let's say we had a scene in a bank, right? And we had to go and film in the bank. Well, we can't use all of their signs, and maybe there was something particular in the scene we needed to rearrange something. So as the art director, what I would do is I would understand. I know what the vision is. We've already talked about it. Ian can't be there because he's out scouting. So once I've got everybody in the art department already underway and working, I would probably pop out to those locations while we were prepping them so I could work with the construction team and the set decorating team if they needed anything to make sure everything that we were going to doing was being prepped properly. So then once we've got it to the point where I think it's ready for camera, then Ian will find the time to come by and make sure that he doesn't have any little particular notes that we need to address. And then we go from there. So as a result of that, you sort of get into a rhythm.
Yeah.
But every day can be different. Like I could spend an entire day in the office working on sets that we're going to build, or I might spend a day, I might be going to 3 different locations that we're prepping that we're going to shoot over the next few days. Right. Or I might be out tech scouting, and tech scouting is when we've decided on all the locations that we are actually going to film in. The whole crew with every department head, we go in mass and we all go to these locations together, and we all talk about what we're going to do so that everybody is completely prepared. And if this department needs something from the other department, that's when all that sort of gets hashed out. So that has to happen for every episode too. So, I might be down on the stage floor working with construction guys. I might be in my office. I might be out at location. I might drive 100 miles in a day. I might never leave my desk.
Right. Wow. Can you think of anything off the top of your head from Parks and Rec that you remember, like helping put together, helping design, like any big projects that you were like, oh my gosh, is this ever going to get done? And then it obviously worked out really well, or anything?
I probably think that about just about everything.
Yeah. I mean, I know that's a million years ago, so it's probably hard to think about.
Yeah, no, but it's typical. I mean, especially in television. In features, we tend to get a little bit more prep time, but in television, we don't have a lot of time.
It's really fast.
It's really fast. I think if one particular one stood out as being a bit of a monumental task that I was worried about, it would be the Harvest Festival.
Oh my gosh, I was so really hoping you would say that. I want to talk about it. Oh my God, amazing.
Yeah, it was a massive undertaking, and we had to do most of it overnight. Right.
Wow.
So I was, there working with the crews from 9 or 10 p.m. one night until 9 a.m. the next morning for a couple of nights in a row.
Oh my gosh. So, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of,
And the other one,
say it.
the other one is Jurassic Fork. That's the other one.
Oh my God.
The restaurant. That was another one. And that was another one that we had to prep overnight. So Jurassic Fork is actually one of my more favorite stories to tell about Parks and Rec because
say it.
we don't typically get a lot of time. We get a script and we get about 5 days to prep it, and then we're shooting for 5 days.
Yeah.
And so a lot of what we do in the art department world, it takes the most time out of anybody. People in props, they can adjust, they can go change a prop real quick unless it's a fabricated prop. Wardrobe, like they can change something relatively quick, but you can't build a new set that fast.
Right.
So when we got the script of which Jurassic Fork was in, there originally wasn't a Jurassic Fork in that script. It initially was a magic show, and it was a magic show that all the group went out and they watched this magician up on stage, and the gag was the magician calls Jerry up onto the stage to be part of his act, and he makes Jerry disappear.
Oh my God.
And then the rest of the gang, because he's Jerry, they forget about Jerry and they just leave, right? And so that was the big joke. And so we actually went and we scouted the Magic Castle here in LA, and we were going to shoot, and we even tech scouted it. We were ready to shoot in the Magic Castle this whole scene.
Wow. And
you'd get a last minute script revision usually like the Thursday or Friday before we would start shooting on the Monday. And the people who got hit the hardest by that was usually props or wardrobe. They usually had some last minute scrambles over the weekend to adjust to those last minute changes. But those last changes usually didn't affect what we did in construction because there was never any time for that. But in this particular case, we got that, I think it was like a Thursday night revision, and we were supposed to start shooting on Monday, right? And we got this revision, and suddenly it's no longer a magic show. It's this place called Jurassic Fork, which is a dinosaur-themed restaurant. And I read this, and I thought, there's no way that we're going to do this, because once I tell them how much money it's going to cost, they're going to go, okay, let's go back to the original idea.
Yeah. When did you say you got that script?
It's like on a Thursday, the Thursday before the Monday we're supposed to start shooting that episode. Now, keep in mind, we can take the bigger things and we can push them towards the end, right?
Yeah.
So, but that still only means we have a week. That's all we have, a week, right? Because it's going to shoot the next Thursday or Friday, and that's all we've got. We can say, okay, you can't shoot this Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday, but we can have it ready for your Thursday or Friday, maybe. So, get this script late on the Thursday. And I just thought, this is going to be an exercise. I'm going to tell them how much more this is going to cost them. And they're going to go, no way, no how. Forget it. Let's go back to the old idea. And I'm pretty sure I gave them a number north of $80,000. And they said, okay. and I was like, okay, this is crazy. And suddenly we had to go into overdrive mode, creating all of those graphics. We found 30-foot tall animatronic Tyrannosaurus Rex that came in pieces. And here in LA, there's this famous restaurant called Clifton's, which was here for years downtown. And it's this place you go into, and it's got 2 or 3 levels, and the center is open. And they made the columns look like these big sequoia trees, right? So we're like, okay, well, that's a great start for us. And it has a big area where we could put a big animatronic dinosaur. And so we go down there and you can film here, but we can't close down during the day. So if you want to film here, every day we close down is a massive amount of money. So you can do the one filming day, which means you have to prep when we closed the night before.
Oh God.
So, they closed at like 9 or 9:30 at night. And then we came down and we had to start creating that. Of course, we're getting all the pieces together, but it's all the trucks are arriving at 9 to 9:30 at night. And we could get it all done, with the course of like 12 or 14 hours, and they come in and they shoot it the next day. Just like truckloads upon truckloads of tropical plants that we brought in there to make it look more like a forest. And of course, one thing that actually never made the cut, but we did it. So now you had this original concept of the magic show where Jerry is made to disappear and they forget about him. So they loved that gag. And a lot of the whole scene was built around that gag. So they needed a new version of that gag at this dinosaur themed restaurant. So they had a scene where Jerry goes to a photo op, and in the corner of this restaurant is a man-sized dinosaur egg that opens up, and you can go in and you sit in a seat inside the egg and you get your picture taken.
Mm-hmm.
So Jerry's like, he's getting all excited. He's going to go get this picture taken. So he pays whatever money he pays. He goes and he sits down inside this egg and he gets his picture taken. And then the top of the egg closes on top of him. And he gets stuck inside the dinosaur egg. And everybody forgets that Jerry's not there and they leave without it.
No, I'm so sad that wasn't in there. I think that sounds so familiar. I feel like it was either in the deleted scenes or I read about it somewhere or something like this, but I don't remember seeing it visually, so I must have just heard about it. But oh my God, that's perfect.
So in addition to the $80,000 extra dollars we spent for all the other stuff, we spent $14,000 having this custom dinosaur egg made. Right? And
oh my God.
And the Morgan Sackett, the line producer, kept coming to me like, it can't cost that much. I'm like, we have no time and I can't find anybody else who can make it. And this is it has to be a certain size. It's got to fit Jerry inside it, and so we reluctantly spent the money, and then we shot it. We shot the whole scene and it never made the cut. And Morgan was furious because we spent all this money on this man-sized dinosaur egg, and the whole gag never made the final cut. So I don't know if it was the next season or the season after, because we had spent so much money. The storage is always an issue, right? So you don't usually store a whole lot, but because we had spent so much money on this egg, we stored the egg. And we had a scene where April's weird artistic friend, Oren, was having an art show. Mm-hmm. Right. And they came to see his art show, and he had this whole weird art installation.
Was it like the farm animal one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Yeah. Where everybody was. Yeah. Okay.
So if you go back through that episode, part of his art installation, you will see a giant man-sized dinosaur egg in the corner.
Oh my gosh. What a great little tidbit to look out for. Yeah. I'm so glad you got to use it.
Yeah. So was Morgan.
Oh my God. And then the dinosaurs themselves, like you said you built those kind of around the columns, or was it a company that kind of sent you the pieces and then you put them together around the columns, or how'd that work?
Julie, our set decorator, found the company who had these things, and they came in. I think we had two dinosaurs in there. One was a T-Rex, and I can't remember what the other one was, and they were animatronic. And they came in these giant crates, barely fit through the door, open them up, and then they assembled them. So they were things that already existed that we brought in and fit into the space. But it was a mad dash. Thank you. It was a mad dash trying to get everybody, like, set decorating is in there. We got tons of greens going in there. We got all the graphics and signs that we got to put up everywhere. And then lighting and electric, they all had to do their thing. And we all had to slam together and get in each other's way and do it in the course of like 10, 12 hours. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and the way that they framed that actually was really interesting, because I feel like you could see a lot of it. Like there was especially one scene where Tom and Ron, I believe, are having a conversation, and like they're basically in like the lower third of the square, whereas like the whole building and the greens and all the decorations and everything were taking up most of the frame. And I was like, I'm so glad they did that, because I feel like it was really important to show the restaurant,
Yes.
Especially with how hard you worked, now that I know the behind the scenes on that.
Important. That's important for us, because we work a lot. We do a lot of stuff that doesn't ever end up seeing light of day. Yeah.
Okay.
Whether it's.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just, whether it's, sometimes we build a giant set and they edit it to all these headshots, or sometimes we build the whole set and we shoot a scene and we don't even it doesn't make the cut. So that both of those things happen quite often.
Oh my gosh. That's amazing. Oh my gosh. So excited to look for that egg in Oren's arm, or a farm animal thing.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so for a harvest festival, though, I mean, were there actual like roller coasters and things, or was that CGI, or how did that work? Do you remember?
God, I can't remember exactly what we did.
It's really the only time you see the roller coaster and like the full on field is that crane shot at the very end. And so other than that, you're walking through it and you're seeing like a carousel.
Right. Which was, there was a lot of discussion about that crane shot, actually. And the reason being that this show is supposed to be a show that is being shot by documentarians, right?
Yeah.
So,
I didn't think about that.
Yeah. So always very aware of where the camera is. And there was like, the discussion was, we got to show the whole festival, but they wouldn't have a documentary crew wouldn't have a guy way up there. So we decided to sort of break the mold of the rules of the show for that shot. So that Harvest Festival was done at a place called Pierce College, which is a community college here that has a whole agricultural wing. And they had a big giant corn maze that they would put up every year. And then they had their pumpkin festival that they would set up next to the corn maze. So we used that as our basis, but then we expanded on it greatly. We brought in some rides, but I feel like there was a big roller coaster that was done in visual effects. I think if you stacked up every episode of Parks and Rec, I'm not sure that might be the only visual effects shot, honestly, where we added something like that.
Yeah, because I know that they add in a lot of like signs or text or something on top of a sign of like outside of a strip mall or something like that. But as far as like the actual building or ride itself, that would seem pretty, I think, the only thing I can really think of maybe. Yeah.
I think, yes, that roller coaster might have been added. I'm not 100% on that. We definitely brought in some rides. There may have been some rides there.
Okay.
I can tell you there were a ton of banners and there were a ton of signs and there was a ton of hay bales and a ton of greens that we brought in and lots of carnival lights and carnival booths and games and rides. And
did that take you longer than usual to set up? Or no, wait, that one was also an overnight one? Or
we also had to do it overnight. I mean, it took longer than usual to coordinate because there were so many parts. You know, we had lots of vendors coming. Everybody had to descend on this one place. Fortunately, we had more room to spread out than you did when we were doing Jurassic Fork. But both of those were massive undertakings, you know, in terms of the amount of graphics and signs and all of that stuff compared to a lot of the stuff that we would do on that show.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, that was kind of like one of my things too, as far as like the signs and the posters and the murals and all that stuff, especially when I first started, I as you go throughout the show, you see more, but especially with Harvest Festival, that's where we kind of start, I feel, for me as an audience member, to see the extra mile that is being given, if you will, like for example, that Harvest Festival original poster where it like looks kind of old and shady and, you know, kind of nasty because it's from like the 70s or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to like, well, I guess first how it gets designed and who kind of is it, you know, the production designer that is like, it has to look this way, and like who is given that kind of direction, or do they just look at the script?
Ultimately, yeah, it all starts with the production designer, right? The production designer is responsible for the entire look of the show. So that means ultimately everything. But, you know, typically you try to hire people who are also talented at what they do, right? Yeah. So you hire a graphic designer, you give them some instruction and maybe some references about the sort of where you want to go with it. And then you let them bring their talents to it, and then you tweak from there, right? So a lot of times in the case of that, and I don't remember if this exactly happened this way, but and now that you're mentioning it, I do seem to remember we had to do like sort of generations of this logo that you saw along the way. Yeah. You know, you usually have a graphic designer, maybe like, you know, this is the idea, play around with this and then give me 3 options. And then they show you like, I got A, B, and C. All right. I love this element of A and I love this element of B. Let's see a version that combines those two. And then, so that's kind of how it's kind of how that all works. It's still very collaborative. You need a good graphic designer who has a good artistic sense. So ultimately, yes, it's up to the production designer to say, yes, this is what we're going to do. And there was enough graphics on this that were very script specific. And so a lot of those things, like we'd get them to the point where we thought that they were done, and then you have to run them by Mike Schur, or you give him options as well in case see if he has any notes, and then we would potentially tweak from there.
Okay.
Before we would go, but
the murals, though. Speaking of all the signs and stuff, I mean, that would have started in the first season, I guess.
Yeah. So the murals, it always starts with lines in the script, right? They have a clear idea of the ridiculous subject matter, and then what we would do is we would take that script, and then we have an illustrator. In this case, we used a gal who does a lot of storyboards, and we would have her do just pencil sketch layouts of what it would look like. And then again, we do options like here's option A, B, and C. And then we bring that back to Mike Schur, and certainly in the first season to Greg Daniels as well. And they go, oh, well, maybe we do X, Y, and Z instead, because now that I see the way you've drawn it, that's kind of cool, or whatever. And then you finally come out on a layout, and then we'd take that pencil layout and we give it to a mural painter, and then we have a reference for the style, and then we just rely on the mural painter to bring their talent again, much like you did the graphic designer. But we would also have them paint them on our stages. So we could go down while they were along the way as they were painting, and we could give them some notes if we thought we should tweak one way or the other. And then once we had a finished mural, we always brought Mike down to look at it. And then if he wanted any changes, we did some changes, and then we would pop it in from there. But yeah, those are some crazy murals. I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure if this show aired today, if we would get away with some of the stuff.
I know. We talk about that all the time. That and The Office, I feel like. I probably would, especially because it's not like, revering these things by any means. They're always saying that this is really messed up.
Yes.
But I mean, to me, it's just like wild with how large those murals are. I mean, they take up the whole hallway. So like, do you have any sense of or an idea of like how long it might have taken to like when they were actually painting? Was it just one person that was painting the mural, or like multiple?
Typically, it was at least one person for a week. Depending on the mural, sometimes it was a little longer than that. I don't think any of them were really shorter than that. Along the way, we had two muralists work on them, and occasionally one of them would actually bring in an extra hand if we needed it faster. So, but yeah, usually it was the actual producing and the painting of it was usually about a week.
There's a park and some pals, and there's also therapy too.
Okay, is that better?
No, I can hear you now, yeah.
Okay, good. I think that this mic must have been messing up, so I'm just going to not use that anymore. That was weird. Okay. Anyway, one of my second to last questions, sorry about that, was about the time capsule itself, since we just reviewed that. I know I had asked you some questions about it, but I was curious, and if you don't know the specifics, that's totally fine, but I was curious about the actual silver time capsule, and how, would you have, or would the art department have gotten a silver pot thing and then painted on the top of it, or would you have made that steel thing? You know what I mean?
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. So if we were doing a feature, we would custom make it. And we would have the time to custom make it because we're doing a television show and we have a short turnaround, we typically don't have that. I sent somebody down to a restaurant supply store, and we started, you in this sort of situations, you kind of want to start with something that you can augment so that it looks like more of something. So we started with a soup pot, and then I think maybe for the lid, we got a different soup pot, and then we cut it and created a lid out of it. And then we got some really cool clip hardware. that we put on it to make it hinge and clip on the top. I don't know if it hinged. I can't remember.
I think it
and
did.
then on the,
Yeah, it opened.
yeah. And then on the top, it had a sort of a seal, sort of Pawnee kind of thing, which was a graphic that we designed. And we actually made it on a printer where you can just keep printing so many layers of ink that you get that dimension that you might out of a sort of a bronze cast something, like a bronze cast plaque. That's my recollection. It was, sort of mashing together these pieces, parts, and then printing that bit on the top. Okay, so when I emailed you about it, sort of, I was the one who sort of gaffed it. It was like, when I mean by gaffing, it had nothing to do with lighting. It was my job to sort of figure out what's the best way to get something cool looking. And then, obviously I talked with Ian, the production designer, but it was, I think I was the one who had the idea. Let's start with a pot. Let's go to the restaurant supply place, and then let's find some really cool clip hardware. We probably got it from like McMaster Carr or Granger or something like that, or who knows what. But you just found all these pieces and then made it what it was.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Now that you say soup pot, I was like, oh my gosh, it kind of looks like the chili pot that Kevin has in the office. I was like, of course, duh.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, but you can't just go down like Williams and Sonoma. You have to go to a full-on restaurant supply where you get something that's got, it's a pot that's really got something. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes so much more sense. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, before I ask my last question, was there anything besides Jurassic Park that kind of stands out to you? I know the audience is probably wanting me to ask more questions, but those are the most questions that I had, so I'm fine with that.
Nothing off the top of my head. I mean, I could probably rattle off. I could probably think of 6 things. I mean, I was on the show for 5 seasons. Like, there were so many memorable things about it. At the time when we were doing it, hardly anybody was watching it.
Right. So, I know. Now it's so crazy.
Now it's this huge phenomenal thing.
Yeah.
So, no, I mean, I don't think anything in particular. The story I tell the most is probably the Jurassic Fork story.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, the last question that I have, and if you don't know this off the top of your head, you can think about it a little bit. But the last question that we always ask our guests is, if you were to relate to anyone on the show or like kind of resonate with any particular character, like for example, I very much resonate with Leslie, which is why I love these kind of nuts and bolts, conversations and behind the scenes, but also like very excitable and trying to like bring it down a notch. So that's who I resonate with. And Maddie, my co-host, is more of an Anne. And so, yeah, I'm just curious if you have anyone that you resonate the most with.
Nobody's ever asked me anything of the sort. And I don't know that I ever gave it 2 thoughts. But if I had to, I'd say like if you took Ron Swanson and you mashed him up with, I cannot remember Rob Lowe's character's name. What was his name?
Chris Traeger.
Yeah, Chris Traeger. You took Ron Swanson and Chris Traeger and you slammed them together, which sounds like, why would you do that? That's probably there's probably little elements of Ron and little elements. Yeah,
I can see that as like a mashup, and that's not a common mashup, but it's definitely a unique one.
Yeah.
You know who I could see, and this would be controversy because he's not technically in this season, but Mark, Paul Schneider's character, who was in season 1 and 2.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I could see that.
Technically, and I'm not just saying that, but it definitely bears weight that he is also a like blueprint architectural artsy guy.
Yeah, no, I can see that. I just he wasn't ever there when I was there, so.
Yeah, so you can't. Well, and he's not like a lead character either, so it's a little tough to say. But I would say, yeah, that makes sense. A little bit of Ron, a little bit of Chris. That sounds right to me.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully I'm not as goofy as Chris, and hopefully I'm not as stubborn
hardcore
and as Ron.
Yeah, intense. Yeah.
But if there's any, I've been working in this business for 30 years now, and the whole cast of Parks and Rec are wonderful, wonderful people. And but if my short list of amazing humans who are actors that I've worked with. Nick Offerman is on that list. So he's he's an incredible person, great guy, created an amazing, iconic character. So how could you not love Ron Swanson?
Yeah, absolutely. He's awesome. And Nick Offerman is just insane as well. Like everything I hear about him / interview wise, it's always good.
Yeah. Yeah. He and his wife, they're both great people.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, I love it. I love that she got to be a part of the show too. It's so fun.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, is there anything that you'd like to promote at this moment or anything that we can look out for right now?
Anything I'd like to promote, if you haven't watched it, you should watch season 3 of The Boys, which I did last year.
Okay.
If you've never watched The Boys, it is one of the best shows out there right now. Highly recommend it.
I'm not familiar with it. I know I've heard of it, but I haven't watched it. So yes, I'll add that to my list.
Yeah, each season is only 8 episodes, so it doesn't take long to get through it. I did season 3. You'll see some of the most ridiculous stuff you've ever seen on a screen in your life, but I highly recommend checking it out.
Awesome. Okay, awesome. I will definitely put that in like the show notes and everything too.
Okay.
Fun. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate your time. Hearing about all of this was amazing. And I mean, Parks is just our fave show ever. So like hearing everything about the behind the scenes and how everything was created is just such a blessing. So I really, really, really appreciate your time today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for reaching out.
Thank you. And I will keep in touch because I might have more questions.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye.
There's a park and some pals, and there's also therapy too.